all the panel members, just to ensure that we don't lose further time, we will try to go ahead and start our discussion. So this discussion is on the basis of innovation, whether innovation and privacy, whether they gel together properly, or whether there is a kind of hindrance to innovation because of privacy. That is the basic topic. And we have in our panel today people with experience from different, say, industry segments. We have Mr. Unmesh Deshpande. He is the CTO of Kingsway Hospital in Nagpur. So a person who has a lot of experience in healthcare industry, transformation of the healthcare industry into digital world, and he has actually been involved in supporting complex technical solutions, not only in health, perhaps in some other industries also. He is actually a hands-on techie. He advises the business process automation and consulting. He also have got great interest in wildlife photography and Himalayan drives, as he says. That's fine. So data is there everywhere, and it's a kind of profile. Actually, we now have a profile of Mr. Deshpande, so that advertisers who want to sell him something on those things can take note of it. Fine. Okay, Unmesh, welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then we have Dr. J.S. Sodhi. He is a professor and a group CIO, Amity Education Group. In case I miss out anything, you are welcome to actually add it subsequently. I'll just go by some information which is available. Okay. So Sodhi brings with him the experience of building up the IT structure of Amity Group, which is a huge kind of a setup with 35 campuses in India and 10 international campuses. When we say international campuses, they have got campus in UK, US, Singapore, Dubai, Mauritius. Today, when people like us look at country names, immediately our thought will go into, oh, this is GDPR area, this is CCPA area, this is Singapore area. So they have exposure today to multiple data protection laws. Of course, they are handling the network of an educational institution, which will have to collect the information of students. It has to have fees and other financial information. It will have the parents' information, plus profiling of the students, because they have to actually prepare them for placement at the end of 4 years. So a strict profiling is required. So there is a lot of work which is related to personal data collection, processing, and maybe disposal of some kind. And when the group has this exposure in multiple countries, I'm sure that data protection on multiple platforms is a challenge which Dr. Sodhi will be facing on a day-to-day basis. He's a person who has been recognized by a number of institutions, given him several kinds of awards. He is also in the advisory board of many national and international organizations. We are happy to have Dr. Sodhi here. Welcome, Mr. Sodhi, for this discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. We have Mr. Kapil Mehrotra, who is presently the group CTO at National Collateral Management Services Limited, a very enthusiastic person. He is in Gurgaon. He has got more than 2.5 decades of experience in BFSI, healthcare, IT consulting, and even in agri-tech domain. He has worked in a number of big companies, hospitals, including Apollo, HCL Healthcare, and so on. And he has been involved in one way or the other in delivering more than 300 plus IT projects. So he must be having a very wide variety of experience in implementation of IT, which of course today we are also discussing in the scope of this data protection. And Kapil has also specifically obtained some kind of a specialization on digital strategy through IIM Bangalore. and he works with a global team to deliver projects of that nature. We look forward to a lot of inputs from him in this particular group, and welcome, Mr. Kapil. We look forward to your this thing. I will just provide the video link for Jackson, then perhaps we will be able to view him. Okay. Now, the other panel member is Archie Jackson. He is a senior director and head of IT and security at a company called Insedo in Gurgaon. He is also a very senior security professional, has more than 2 decades of experience, and he is very passionate in privacy and cybersecurity initiatives, working on digital transformation, and particularly using emerging technologies. We will be discussing some of those emerging technologies, perhaps to some extent in this group, in this panel discussion. Of course, technology is so wide that we will not be able to discuss everything, but at least we'll get some kind of an insight. He also has won numerous global and national recognitions as top CIO and CISO and several certifications. And I understand he has got exposure to quantum computing, 5G strategies, etc. Of course, quantum computing is a matter of personal interest for me, because I started my, maybe I ended my educational career as a physics, you can say, postgraduate, and quantum computing was at the nascent stage at that time. And not quantum computing, quantum physics was at the nascent stage at that time. Now that has been applied in quantum computing. I am, of course, trying to apply quantum computing and talk about it in issues like cyber evidence and other things. So it's a matter of some interest for me. So, friends, this panel has healthcare professionals, IT security people, and education people, and the IT implementation professionals. So we together shall explore this particular theme of privacy issues, whether they hinder innovation. Okay, that is the object. Now, before I start asking my questions, for the purpose of the audience, putting it in the particular context, whenever we talk of privacy issues, we are talking of, first of all, segregation of data into personal and non-personal. This is one operation which has to happen before we do anything. Then, whether that data is personal under Indian law, personal under, say, EU law, personal under Singapore law, that is a second classification. So classification and segregation of information in my database is the first technical challenge which any organization has to do. And if your organization is already in existence, discovery of such data in the existing database is a greater challenge. Say, new data coming in, I can always have a process and filter it through that. But legacy data, particularly when I don't know where all it is lying, not necessarily only in a central database, it is there in 100 or 1,000 computers of my employees. So recognizing the personal information is the first technical challenge. Then comes issuing a notice and then collecting the consent for a specified purpose. See, these are all part of the collection process, and only technologies have to put in a process where they will tell the person who is providing the data, I want information for this particular purpose, and this is how I am going to use it. This is how I am going to dispose it of. These are the persons to whom I will be sharing this information. So the Act talks about 13 different notices to be given in India, and all that I have to give as a notice, collect a consent, which should be having a kind of a recognition like a contract. It is not just giving one mobile screen and say permission granted or something like that. It is an offer and an acceptance. Technology people have to implement that enforceable contract, that is consent as an enforceable contract. Then retention of data only as long as it is required, deletion of it, And then all this consent has to be available for future reference. So technology has to enable tagging the consent with the information, then keep the data accurate and updated, and also provide for portability and deletion on a later date. So these are all what privacy people say this is a law. For technology people, each is a technical challenge. So I am saying that when we talk of innovations from technology, we are looking at these kind of challenges which are there. Now with this background, now we will come to this area of how the recent innovations are posing, you can say, an extra challenge. Let us first look at the healthcare. I will request Mr. Unmesh Deshpande to answer this forthcoming question, because health information is perhaps the most sensitive information in the personal data structure, because the lack of proper security can create significant harm. If you are categorizing the level of harm which can be caused by a data breach, it is in health sector which can it can create the maximum damage, because there is a life threat if it is not properly used. That is why criminals focus on health care industry, because if they somehow are able to take out the reliable health data, maybe in the dark web it has got more value. Next, of course, comes financial, and other things come separately. Okay, so the health data is the most significant. And what is the kind of innovation which we are seeing here? We are looking at wearables, we are looking at implants. See, at least wearables give information externally, but implants sit inside our body. There may be a ICD kind of device which is heart monitoring the heart. Not only monitoring the heart, if the heart rhythm makes some pattern which is not good, maybe it may give a small current or something like that. So there is an intervention in the personal health within the body by an electronic device, and that electronic device may be even accessible from outside through Wi-Fi. Okay, so that is the kind of innovations and corresponding risk. Diabetic patients also have something like this. And I understand that in 2013, the US Vice President Dick Cheney, who had a wireless connectivity in his pacemaker, wanted it to be turned off because he was feeling that somebody may hack and commit what could have been a cyber murder. So this is the kind of, say, innovations which are coming. There is, of course, the cyber risk that's on the one side, but today we will talk about the privacy issues, because the implant has got an identity, device identity. It must be having the identity of the person to whom it is given, because parameters are fixed according to that. Therefore, the data which it is sending to the database is a personal information. So now coming to Mr. Deshpande, in such a scenario, how do hospitals and whoever is related to this kind of thing, putting medical implants, manage to have privacy and confidentiality in implants, particularly when they're connected through Wi-Fi?
Yeah, very interesting, long and burning question. Thank you for that. What I feel is every healthcare organization which is IT enabled and aiming to be paperless, end-to-end, fully IoT connected, and with some kind of a machine learning or artificial intelligence going into the business logic, must categorize their data sets into several segments. Data at rest, active data, the data being continuously transmitted and received from various IoTs and devices, and also your legacy and old database, which has a lot of meaningful information. Now, every category of information that is lying in various formats and in various forms on various storages must be addressed with a different business logic. The transient data, the kind of example that you quoted of ICD, which we commonly call as a pacemaker, if it is in the IoT family and it has got communication channel either on some GSM track or a Wi-Fi track, we need to really work out the kind of encapsulation that the signal would have. The encapsulation has to be a what should I say? Geotag, that in case any any configuration or any change in the configuration of the way that ICD is going to work has to be done. The subjected patient must be in the periphery, geometric periphery of a clinician's office, where in case any intervention is done and the results are not suitable or not encouraging, they could be reverted back. So geofencing of such life critical or life dependent systems on which the life depends have to be controlled. They have to be geo mapped. There has to be a trust relationship between a controller which can control the device and the device which is controlled. This trust relationship should form a non-permeable tunnel wherein the control signals can be interfaced either on a TCP/IP or a SDLC, whatever kind of integration you have designed. With this, we bring in certain kind of peace of mind into the patient who is actually wearing and utilizing that IoT. And this will definitely enhance the confidence of people wearing them or adopting this new technology of getting well. That's on that. But pandemic has taught us or forced us to offer treatment to the patient via telemedicine and telecardiology as well. Now, how do we secure a telemedicine or a telecardiology channel? Assuming that there is a clinic situated out of Delhi and the patient is in Mumbai, who is the registered patient of the Delhi hospital, who got implanted at Delhi hospital, and because of pandemic, he has got stuck in Mumbai. So using any available Wi-Fi, if a mobile phone can be connected, the mobile phone of the patient can be interfaced with the ICD which that person is having. So NFC kind of stuff, if it is done with an authentication and a token exchange, that can be secured. This secured communication between the handheld device and the implant will be connected to internet using any Wi-Fi, be it a secured Wi-Fi or unsecured open hotspots as well. The moment this particular transaction comes onto the global internet, it will secure using an AI engine, which is a part of that encapsulation technology, and automatically get to the hospital in Delhi. So in essence, without any intervention of IT support or IT technician or IT administrator, the patient's implant through a handle has got securely connected to a telecardiologist who is sitting in Delhi, who can monitor, control, remedify, and in case of any problem, what we call in healthcare industry as a code blue or something like that, a device fails and patient is at a risk of his life. All these things can be done. All these things can be done because we have secured each and every link in this communication through a secure tunnel. So privacy breaches won't be there in case of implants. But the applications, the mobile applications that the patient may use in teleconsulting, we really need to be very cautious about how they are getting encrypted. Whether it's a basic 64-bit or 128, or is there is a token exchange, or is there is a device-specific communication, whether it is a registered MAC address of the device, all these are part of the approach, how you approach the security of data. The data is valuable and personal to the patient, as well as the organization, that is the healthcare establishment, who's let's say facilitating of creation of that data. It is onus on the patient as well as the healthcare operator to have the data very private. A simple example, if a patient who is the ultimate endpoint on the client side discloses his username and password to somebody, privacy is breached. So irrespective of having a world-class technology, protecting the data tunnels and data flow, it is again boiling to the human ethics to maintain secrecy. So, I mean, that is how I would take this question and probably try to elaborate on that.
Oh, fine. So you were talking about the security related controls like geofencing, so that the device cannot be accessed from too far. So there will be a linked device kind of a thing. So it may be a very short distance. It has to be 8-10 feet, so that in the same room in the hospital or something like that, perhaps. And then the encryption. That is when data goes out of that particular device, that is implant into the next device through which further communication has to be done, encryption. But you have also highlighted the fact that ultimately social engineering is there everywhere, and that is something which technology cannot handle to some extent, okay? Or you have to factor it as a risk and at least look at how to quickly reverse the, some happenings. Kapil, do you have any specific comment on what we are discussing right now?
Yeah, that's a very interesting conversation because I worked in healthcare.
Yeah.
And so what example Unmesh has given, like really relevant. And good thing is like not only heart devices, there are so many monitoring devices are nowadays is coming actually, right? Which is collecting.
I think your connectivity is down. Oh, okay. Until you come back, shall we go to Archie? You have anything to say, Archie? Archie? No? Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. I'll cover this up. So, what Umesh has mentioned, first of all, I'm really delighted to be part of this panel. And Navi sir, you're a role model for all of us. So, really honored and delighted to be part of this. What Umesh has been mentioning, it's a very, because I've been with healthcare, I've been with NHS UK for like 7 years. I can understand, I mean, all the aspects that Umesh has mentioned, it's quite relevant and on the, to the specific use cases of healthcare. Now, from data perspective, something that I want to add around this is irrespective of these different laws that we have, especially let's say GDPR or in the United States from California perspective or in regional perspective, there are just as an employee when we join a particular organization, there are a set of guidelines that we agree to, and those guidelines are again aligned with the data privacy. But how well we do, these are some of the fundamental areas that we usually miss at. So one is around the bribery acts. So these are the few things that we sign up. So bribery act, we also sign NDAs if we are working on specific client specific data or information, not only limited to PII, but also from the classified data perspective. The third aspect, there are unconditional bias. That is another fundamental guideline that we follow or that we sign up at the time of our employment. So these, starting from these, before even getting into the classification, of the next layer, this layer of the documentation or the sign up, it is usually considered as documentation, the onboarding, but these should be periodically part of our review cycle into the audits and everything, which I doubt many organizations do not follow, and because of which the basic understanding with the employed members, say it be any not only from healthcare, be it from any specific scope, they miss out on those areas. And I mean, from definitely, if we move on more detailed into the healthcare, yes, we can add on to these. We can, if we go into manufacturing from IoT perspective, we have a separate use case. But again, these are the, I mean, my first basic fundamental concept is the time when the employee onboards. There are so many things which, even from education perspective, we sign up. So we sign up a lot of things, but those sign-ups usually goes into the documentation. These are not periodically reviewed, assessed if we are complying to all those. So that is the fundamental thought that I wanted to add upon. I guess Kapil is back. He can
Okay,
be
okay.
more specific.
Thank you. We'll come back to you again.
Yeah.
We will now move to the education sector, which Dr. Sodhi represents, because the educational institutions collect information, which includes health information, which includes financial information, and say examination kind of information, which is a part of the profile. And most of the people who do background check will come back to the organizations to ask about the educational qualification and so on. So the protection of privacy and also the quality of information, which is part of this security. Say when cyber security fails, it adversely affects the quality. And so when the data protection law says that you have to maintain the information, the particular, say, updated and accurate, data protection law is also in a way imposing cyber security regulations as a part of the law. So if cyber security fails, it is not only a cybersecurity issue, but it is also a factor on which you may face penalties under the data protection law. So it is part of that. So Dr. Sodhi, now considering this variety of kinds of data which you are handling in multiple jurisdictions, what has been your experience on this data privacy in the education sector in general?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Navi Saab, for inviting me. I'm really feeling honored to be a part of this esteemed panel. So as an opening remarks, I'll say it's a tug of war. On one side, it is a fast-moving technologies, massive adoptions of internet, social networking, e-commerce, new businesses practices, new digital behaviors, data analytics, massive adoption of AI and ML. And on the other side, fundamental right of individual to protect their privacy. You know, we all have seen that world has changed. It has really become a data-driven. We all know this personal data, which you mentioned, whether it's examination or it is, health-related, it's a new world. And personal data is everywhere. In the previous session, you were giving an example of Zomato case. All this personal data is available everywhere and it is highly accessible also. And nowadays, technologies are making it easy to use for governance, business, and marketing also. But sometimes this personal data is being used in a way which is not acceptable to us, which comes into kind of intrusion to a privacy. And this massive data breaches due to cybersecurity and the lack of protection of personal data is bringing another aspect as a question of privacy. So innovation with data brings a lot of benefit to everyone, to companies, to people, to society in general. But it also exposes the privacy of individuals in many ways. So that's the reason I think most of us, in fact, topic of this panel discussion is also whether organizations perceive privacy as an innovation killer, because data mining and data analytics are the forefront of today's ICT. Innovative applications which make use of this personal data, using that constraint of privacy, because they need to meet lots and lots of legal obligations if really have to meet that privacy part. Now, personal data is, and it will always remain as a valuable asset for everyone. Organizations or the forums which are managed to find the balance between innovation and data privacy, or to remove this tug of war between both of them, can always get a significant edge. But I personally believe that privacy-friendly analytics it requires the ability to manage and control the use of personal data across end-to-end analytics lifecycle, from data discovery, any kind of data, which you mentioned, because as an education, we also capture all the admission from all kinds of data. So from data discovery, visualization to data preparations, model development, deployment, and automation of decision making, we can see a lot of analytics tools nowadays. So privacy has to be baked into every step, which I believe. It has to be a part of design of any data solution, which we follow as an MIT organization group. And I also believe that innovation and data privacy don't have to be odd with each other. Nowadays, a lot of personal data protection regulations are already there, which are, giving driving factors to the privacy-centric innovations. New products and services are being developed to help organizations using personal data without compromising this privacy of individuals. I'll give you a few examples, like synthetic data generation using ML. This system helps to scientists to access personal data anonymously. A study has been done to describe ML algorithm, which automatically creates synthetic data, which is as good as real data. I'll give you another example, like identity management using blockchain techniques, which allow verify identities without exposing personal data. And another thing which we are seeing as a privacy 2.0, that is personal data monetization, so giving a more human-centric approach, which is empowering individuals to control how much personal data can be collected or shared. There is a own personal choice. So, one of the main concerns that mostly individuals are not aware, that implication of giving personal information in exchange of free services. Nowadays, a lot of free services are there. If they don't understand the proper resource to access how third party is going to treat this data. But I think to address these things, there are already many, like PETs, privacy enhancing technology. There are so much, solutions are available. So maybe we will discuss these solutions during further discussions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sodhi. You have expressed a confidence that innovation will not only create hindrances, but also perhaps provide its own solutions. So we'll come back to that. Now we will move back to Mr. Mehrotra if he is there. Okay. Now we have discussed about privacy issues in healthcare and partially in the education segment. Now we also have the IoTs, okay, smart cars, and say devices like Alexa or say smart TVs. The problem with these kind of devices is that they will be always listening. They will be always viewing. Though they may respond only when you call Alexa, they have to respond when you call Alexa, they will have to 24/7 be listening to you. So this always listening and always viewing kind of devices, they actually have access to privacy. That is your privacy in homes and other things. So these devices, of course, collect the information and share it with the central database. So the company actually gets the privacy, private information of a huge number of people. Normally, we say that it comes in a pseudonymous form because the company database may know the device ID, but whose device is that one has to look at a second information. It is feasible, it's possible that information lies in the company. So some insider can actually put the two together and then convert that pseudonymous information to identifiable information. That is the risk. Now, and even in the smart cars also it can happen. Cars look at the driving habits. Ultimately, that reflects the driving habit of the driver, who is perhaps the owner of the car. So there is, in terms of profiling, that is a reasonable assumption that a particular car belongs to the particular owner and the information belongs to him. Maybe he will have a driver to drive or something like that, but prima facie, that is linked to the particular owner of the car. So the companies will have information, personal information. So how do you think the companies can manage that their insiders do not have access to the mapping of the device ID with the customer ID and create identified information about the normal information which comes down in pseudonymous form? So Kapil, can you expand on this if you want? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for calling me in this panel discussion. And I really admire you a lot, sir. Uh, and thank you, fellow colleagues. And they are we have been talking so many times. And thank you, the people, those are in the conversation. This is very pertinent topic wherein IoT devices are coming up like anything, and the privacy becomes a very big issue. And see, the the IoT game is very difficult to basically secure, is because the moment I will think of any security, because IoT devices, they run on a very small memory and the small network. And if we put more security there, so they will be more vulnerable. So we have to have 360-degree layer create. So one side is where the data is going, other side is network, other side is your devices. And not only that, there are so many other dependent devices are coming now these days, which are required integration with them, so that I can easily integrate those devices. The example what you are giving is like smart cars. So MG Hector is the best example where everything is a voice driven, and you go in a car, you start talking, and every instruction you give through the voice command, and they will follow. The problem is that, and if I take the example of Alexa, so Alexa has a different combination altogether, wherein it's collecting information what we are talking. Because so I like to give you example. Whenever we go for any these kind of IoT devices, you talk for the smart city, electricity, or any kind of wearable things. See, the first game changer is required is the GPS connection. Whenever we talk for any device, so it's required GPS. And if I give the GPS, what is going to be happen? Everything will be monitored, right? Whether it is a healthcare, whether it is a my fitness band, whether it is a electronic meter. I'm using this term categorically, monitoring. Whenever I'm talking for the monitoring, it means I'm collecting information, your private information, your PII and PI as well, right? How? Because you have given me the GPS access. I know where are you. Now the next question comes is, I'm monitoring 24 hours to you? Yes, I am. Because I'm gonna bill you. I'm gonna bill you, right? If I'm taking service from the healthcare, so definitely I need to know what you have used. What is your conditions? Otherwise, other medical legal issues will pop up. So there is an ecosystem what we are creating. Try to understand. That is why I'm using this term GPS and monitoring, and everybody knows it. But they have a correlation. And the moment I will implement these two words in the IoT device, then privacy becomes the game changer. Then we have to think for it, what would be critical for me and what would be not critical. Because the moment I say, if you buy the Apple Watch, you never think of it because everything is default. Every device has a default feature. You just click, install. Buy Alexa, click, install. But have you ever seen the settings what Alexa has is? Because they have a setting in the backend where they say, I will protect your data, but I can use your data for my internal research purpose. And I can share with the other entities which are basically part of my ecosystem for the upselling that information. Because whatever I'm talking, so my talk has a keywords, and Alexa registered those keywords and basically perform activities and give inputs to the other ecosystem devices or other networks as well. Again, I'm talking about GPS and monitoring because somebody is monitoring. Now, not only that, there is another new feature which is Alexa just now launched it, which is called basically earlier everything was driven through the voice command. You buy Alexa, anyone from home can say, "Hello Alexa, how are you?" Everybody voice basically respond. But I can now restrict and basically make a restriction for my voice only. Whenever I'm opening Alexa, Alexa will only hear my voice command, because Alexa is integrated with my lighting system. Alexa is integrated with my fridge. Alexa is integrated with my micro oven. Okay. If someone else is giving instruction unnecessary, those instructions will be passed. Now that's a security feature they are bringing in. Let's say 4 people are in a house, so all 4 can basically configure voice command in Alexa, so that like there will be no uh, differences. And that's a new feature just they launches. So because so why I'm talking about this, because there are so many backend voice commands are happening. Whenever we are talking for the GPS voice command, monitoring it, privacy becomes a issue now.
Fine.
I like to bring up the another point is, whereas there are so many flaws also we have, because this system, our IT law is, privacy law is getting mature, wherein like we are talking about section 43A, and which is basically complementing to section 72, which says like any breach or penalty will be enforced. But 43A says like minimum you have to have these things there. But you know, like in 2001 there was a lot of things were missing, and now 2011 they have improved, and now they are talking for the next level. But you know, having said that, your liabilities becomes more complicated whenever we are now that, because there are 3 parties are agreed: internet, the manufacturer, IoT manufacturer, and the user. So who is liable for the breach if anything has happened? Now data ownership will becomes a more complicated. Reason is because who is owning that data? Is I am owning that data because I bought this device, this is my data, I can say this is my data, but I have given the access of that device to store on a cloud, and the cloud IoT cloud owner is managing my data, right? So it's a very complicated ecosystem. And whenever we talk for this, and another thing becomes a very complicated, which is contracting. Any device, whenever we are buying, who is having the contract between whom? Because you never sign any contract, you say okay, everything is accepted. I'm giving you again Apple Watch example. Buy it, just click, done. And there is a contract, by the way, for your information, which is basically buyer and seller contract. The buyer basically bought the device, and seller basically given the device to you, right? And we never read that contract. And the last point which I wanted to bring is basically intellectual property. Is my data is an intellectual property? Is my property, or the device owner's property, or the cloud owner's property, right? With this, like I would like to mention the last comment on it is like in all the cases, if I talk for take the example of Alexa, Amazon is 100% claiming to secure that information so that no one even internally can access it. But research is basically getting, what point you mentioned is because mapping, in a way, my device mapping and my voice data is mapped with the in a way so that people cannot basically decrypt that information. They cannot basically get this is my voice or this is that. That's the security big 4 companies are providing. But what about the companies, those are startup? Are they really following the same pattern? Are they ready to invest that kind of amount in the security and basically provide that kind of comfort to us? Those things are missing. That's why like this law, privacy law, has to be improved. There are a lot of things what I'm thinking is required to change. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Kapil. Now, say, Mr. Archie Jackson has been handling many digital transformation assignments. Now, what we discussed so far is that there is a device, there is a consent, and whether the user understands that consent or not, there is a request, and somewhere perhaps Amazon may say, I have your consent. Okay. Now, probably when it is required, it will be produced. Of course, we know GDPR authorities are not very happy with the way the consents are obtained. In fact, Google was actually once fined because they felt that there are several layers of consent to actually lead to the understanding of the whole thing is a nightmare for an ordinary person. Of course, in India, we have tried to bring in the concept of consent manager so that an ordinary person who cannot decipher this maze of consents can take the assistance of a I can say an expert consent manager. I think that is a great idea, which even Justice Sri Krishna was mentioning on the other day. But despite that, when we are looking at transformation, what comes to my mind is there is so much of legacy data, and then we are transforming the organization into a digitally driven organization. We want to make use of the current data for something good later on. Whether the permissions given earlier hold for new processes, obviously it may not, because this process was not in existence 1 year back. So obviously I could not have taken the consent. And the Indian law and some other laws are also talking of obtaining reconsent after a specified period. Okay, that where even if the purpose has not changed, there may be a time limit after which you have to take a consent once again. So which means that you have to take reconsents and permissions which are not included in the earlier consent during this digital transformation exercise. Now, can Mr. Jackson talk about how do we manage this transition from a legacy state to a new digitally driven organization, at the same time pre-data protection kind of a situation to a date when suddenly tomorrow onwards PDPB is applicable kind of a thing. So that transition, how do you expect the organizations to manage? Just your reactions on that.
Thank you, Navi sir. Before I deep dive into the specific question, let me just set the context. First of all, the agenda of today's discussion is superbly amazing. It's hindrance towards innovation. So that's something quite an enlightening topic. And what the views that Dr. Sodhi as well as Kapil has shared are quite, resonating with this question as well. So I'll elaborate onto this. For example, if we talk about IoT, if we talk about Alexa, if we look at self-driving AI engines and all, so all this information, that's now, yes, there are a lot of specific needs that need to enhance over the over each pillars of these enablement. However, if we specifically look at the data, so the data collection, where the data collection is being happening, the data storage that is happening. So in those specific areas, now, especially where digital transformation, so that's one from the data storage perspective. Now, when we are looking at data utilization, the legacy as well as the new data utilization into the aspects of digital transformation. Let me take a use case. Let's take there is a historical data that is there where at the time there hasn't been any consent, but that may be useful. Second is there is another aspect of the current real-time data. From some of the cases that I've worked upon, the approach has been in both segments. One is we have gone through a recollection of data because the data collection of the current scenario where especially for the AI learning. So when we take the initial consent, the basic consent, which is around training and learning aspect, which also includes learning of the AI engines. It may not be humans learning. It would also be learning from the AI perspective. So when we collect those data, that also means that the data is also being used to help our AI engines learn from that. So that could be FSDs, which are fully self-driving cars. It could be Alexa. It could be anything. Second aspect, the data that is there as a legacy that would help in the digital transformation, let's say AI or learning, it may be huge chunk of legacy data, which may have, I mean, what we need to make sure that is not breached, the PII information or the PHI information. Rest is all pure data that can be reused, irrespective it may be. Now, at that point in time, when that data is collected, first, they're assuming there hasn't been any consent taken, and that data has been going across. It may be used into A, B, C, D, different kind of projects. Now, ideally, the data collection activity, I mean, in the ideal scenario, there should be a reconsent mechanism that should be in place, so that we look back, we'll go back to the data providers and then get the reconsent. So that's something which should happen in the ideal scenario. But many a times in the current scenario, the gap that I could see is the data processors are naive. They do not have that level of visibility, that understanding. They continue using the legacy data, and it goes on expanding into other projects, and you never know what chunk of that data is now residing into any other segment. So these are the gaps that we need to fill upon. But again, how is secondary, but from where we need to, I mean, the point where we need to hit is the point where there is PII data or PHI data residing in legacy, and that is being processed, reused. So at that point, that particular segment, if we hit and reach out to the data processors, with the awareness, with the clarity that these things needs a reclassification. That's something, a lot of process-based exercise that should be in place. Another important aspect, many a times data processors confuse between security and privacy. And that's something which is, I mean, I've seen a complete trend across generations to generations, where people they have a misconception between privacy, and they cannot put a thin line between it. So if you look at a real-time example, SolarWind breach, the SolarWind breach that happened, many of the Fortune 500 companies, do not have that depth of privacy breach that has happened in there. If we set aside the security breach that is there, looking at the privacy perspective, SolarWind monitors the infrastructure. SolarWind monitors the information of the infrastructure, and it's a third party. Now, when the moment there's a complete new, I mean, we can spend a lot of time talking about the third party. The third party, when it integrates, a lot of thoughts can be added. So trying to reduce, I mean, trying to, because this is a complete different set of conversation that can be triggered with a third party engaging into a data model where data integrates. Now, SolarWind, if we deploy that tool that is monitoring our infrastructure, the moment it is monitoring the infrastructure, it means Fortune 500 companies, 425 Fortune 500 companies have been using SolarWind, 75 are not. And it doesn't mean the data and the kind of exercise that I've experienced. So there have been informations being cascaded or validation being coming through. Are you using SolarWind? Or I mean, in any of your environment, are you using SolarWind? Yes, no, tick, no. If I'm not using SolarWind, I'm fine. But actually, it is not. it should also have a question or a review where are you using any of those 425 Fortune 500 clients' data, or is your data residing in any of those environments? Because when SolarWind is monitoring those infrastructure of those Fortune 500, 425 organizations, it's monitoring their infrastructure. That somewhere there is a privacy breach, some of the information breach that is already there of your data that is residing, Amazon, Google, all of that. Your data is there in the cloud. You never know privacy around those aspects if it is breached or not. So this is something that I wanted to additionally add upon. Yep, back to you, sir.
I appreciate that supply chain management issues and other things are also to be taken into account. Now we will go to one more area, which I think Mr. Unmesh, we can start with Mr. Unmesh. Whenever we talk of innovation, people sometimes talk of the new 5G technology and say that 5G technology will make a difference. But I would like to know from all of you as experts whether 5G technology will definitely make any impact on the privacy issues. Okay, whether it will. So of course, we know that with the enhancement of the speed of data transfer, new services will come into existence. Maybe that is one of the reasons. So let us look at all of you briefly explain how 5G technology may affect the privacy scenario. We'll start with Mr. Deshpande.
Privacy is actually a process of maturity. The privacy standards for any new or upcoming technology, they have to be evolved. 5G is still technologically or rather commercially not available for everyone. It is available in beta source, right? About 32% of operators, they are pointing out the various security breaches that can happen because of this new connectivity platform. What is actually 5G? All the operators, they are converging on a similar platform to have a better interconnect, interop, so that the network performances and speeds, they really scale up. Owing to this aggregation of all the operators on a common platform, there is going to be a big challenge of having all the security and privacy facilities offered by different providers at a similar level. Uniformity of standards of across the operators is going to be a challenge over there. But I'm pretty confident that it will evolve over the time. Then compliance or the capability of connecting to downward technology. Assuming that the 5G is becoming more and more popular, what happens to the devices and the security systems which are available on 4G or even local Wi-Fi's? How do we integrate? So wherever there is a connectivity or connection or an integration comes, it's like a chain, The strength of the chain can be defined by the weakest link in that chain. All links cannot be equal. Having said that, when adopting 5G into healthcare, we need to be prudent and we need to form our own decision matrix of which services to deliver over 5G and which services to be delivered over conventional carriers. Mission critical systems. Again, you take an example. These days, ambulances are very high tech and they are called as a mobile cardiac unit. They have got all the biomedical equipment which support the patient, including heart-lung machines and whatever ventilators and etc. etc. Now, if a clinician at the base hospital wants to monitor all these things, if it is put on a conventional network, it is tried and tested. Any change from a tried and tested platform to a higher and better offering will require a subsequent evaluation of how the things are getting managed on a newer platform? What kind of security breaches can happen? What kind of the privacy commitments that you have already made with your customers, that is in healthcare patients? Who are the stakeholders who will be affected by any breach in privacy? And what is the direct or indirect cost of losing data? Not only that, in case you have an agreement or you have got consent from patients and stakeholders to monetize data, what kind of data sets all these mobile and mobility solutions on a new platform would generate? So, I mean, people should positively look at 5G technology because they offer a lot of, they solve a lot of connectivity issues being a common platform. Ubiquity will come. Mobility will be like right now it is in silos, but it will be unified structure everywhere. So, I mean, from a healthcare background and a network and privacy infrastructure background, I think those are the key drivers that we need to consider before really embracing on this new technology.
Thank you. Let me have the views of Dr. Sodhi. Impact of 5G on privacy in your environment. Yeah.
I think 5G is rolling out around the world and with all of promises to provide seamless connectivity to support diverse innovation we call as a smart home or driverless car or industrial automation, 3D film, augmented reality. It could be used for the health sector or for the education sector. And 5G is going to enable billions of IoT devices to be deployed with a vast number of new applications to be conceived. I still believe that security risks are there on a 5G applications, which will mainly come from the, from the device, from the network, from the edge, from the cloud also, and as a centralized security. I will take you to the smart city project from this 5G question, because we know that in 2019, Google sisters company Sidewalk, which announced a project aimed at converting a Toronto into a smart city. But after meeting resistance from the citizens, it scaled down from 190 acres to 12 acres, and just for a Toronto's waterfront area. And another half a year, the project got shut down because still, a trust among the citizens and the technology, there's a vast difference, we can say. And what my colleague Kapil and Archie has, explained about the IoT things, because IoT is going to play a major role in a smart city concept or in a 5G network. So, primarily IoT being a very small in size in a processing unit, it do not have a update facility like other IT assets like servers or systems what we have. It is a main gateway to for any kind of hacking thing. In a smart cities or in 5G network, it's a complete network of such IoT devices. And these IoT devices work as an access point to enter any smart city or 5G network. So this means anyone who just need a break to one IoT device can gain access to that complete network with all the data aggregated and everything. So still development of smart cities requires processing of all kinds of informations, like whether it is a geolocation, it is a traffic, it is energy consumption, environmental, and all these comes into the scope of Data Protection Act, where collection and use of these data is actually prohibited without the informed consent of individual consent. So the intersection of all the information in order to create, few good available products or good services, even for those benefit of those citizens itself, has a really clear impact on the privacy of these people also. So there's always a principle of, to follow the principle of privacy by design, privacy by default, and minimization. Data to be aggregated only which is required. Unfortunately, due to exponential growth of this big data, which is coming from various devices, whether you can say IoT, it is being stored. And here we require, say, a concept of profiling, I should say, which is, so that to keep anonymity among of individuals, but create a group, a profile of a consumer so that we can do the data mining on these profiles and groups and get some behavior patterns out of that. So I think many suggestions for this basic data security or to keep the privacy, just like to keep a very simple security measures like data encryptions and network access controls, which has been found very effective in case of our enterprise level data breaches. And having a good standards between the IoT manufacturers and the software developers. We also have a EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, which has already created a guidelines for the smart city networks to ensure the privacy of the citizens. A lot of such things are available. It is requirement to have a very transparent between the manufacturers and the citizens, so that there should be very clear, very transparent view about what data is being, what data is being collected, purpose it is being used, how long it is to be retained. If you keep the longer the data, there's a more risk. And strictly ensuring that no personal identifiable information should be accessible to the general public, and limiting to the data access, giving privileges to only those who are responsible to it. If we take care of these kind of measures, I think, of course, we can go ahead with the new innovations along with the privacy and security. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, we have had a fair round of say discussions. Of course, we can carry on in amount of time. Let me see if there are a couple of questions from the audience, so that we will try to take some inputs from there and then again go with any panel members. Ramesh, are there any questions to start with?
So there is one question from Mr. Kamal Dave.
Yeah.
As one is integrating IoT with additional features, isn't it adding or complex to vulnerabilities as more and more data is getting collected, and companies can, by using data mining with the AI, can obtain not just PII, but even the biometric data?
Yeah, I think we'll maybe we'll ask several people here. Start with, let us say, Kapil.
Yeah, I'll help this. See, biometric data means like your name, address, phone number, email ID, right? And before answering this, like I am asking a question whenever you are going in a mall and post buying and shopping and you're moving out. So everybody is asking, sir, give me the feedback. And you are happily sharing your name, phone number, email ID, these three information. You are in written giving that information, and today you are worrying it about that and talking about privacy. So it's more awareness what information you are talking for, because whenever we are talking for the IoT devices, most of the IoT devices needs a mapping with your biometric data. Until unless we will not map your information, we cannot encrypt, and we cannot basically map encrypted data in our database, right? Which are maybe required for a different purpose, for sharing purpose, for ecosystem, for other purposes. It is mandatory actually. Either they will encrypt your biometric information or the other information. And now these days, like there is a very strict rule is around, wherein like whenever I'm sharing information, my personal information, registering that devices, that has to be encrypted. That's a straight guideline is there. That is the rule. If data is not encrypted, this will be, it means you are not compliant. So you should not worry about it whenever you are going for any kind of devices. Please find out the genuine devices and ensure they will ensure it like this. So I'm giving you example of Alexa. I'm giving you example of Apple Watch. it's a guaranteed what guarantee they are giving. But in case you are asking for a device coming from the China, I'm really worried about that.
Right.
So more, so it's a money game because so many devices which are coming in the market and people are straight away basically adopting it and they are using it. I'm really worried about the privacy about that. Otherwise, the standard devices, they follow all the norms and the rules and security. Over to you.
Thank you. Any more questions, Ramesh?
Sir, we will take one more question, sir,
Yeah.
from Mr. Narasingha Rao.
Yeah.
Innovation is driven by application developers too. Application level privacy fixes issues at the root. What extent is the awareness of privacy consideration amongst the developers who code these systems, these applications? Yeah.
Yeah, Archie?
It's an amazing question, and that's the problem of the current scenario, where application developers are dealing with extensive data, which especially if we are building up microservices and getting the APIs integrated, scenarios where you are getting uh, data coming from an analytics tool and then processing in information, getting some dashboards created as a simple use case. In all such scenarios, one of the major information or one of the major aspect is when we are designing a particular tool, first of all, the use case should be clearly defined where that particular tool would be used. If it is an application, the complete view of the user base, how that application would be used, who would be using those applications, who would be the intermediate stakeholders, who would be the third-party supply chain in the entire ecosystem. If we have that level of visibility at the very start, at the very inception, the right data information, which is looking at the data that we are using for the particular use case or in future implementation of that particular tool or application, that can be segregated. Let's say if we are creating an application which is for payment gateways, or like Paytm, let's say Paytm application is being designed. In that particular case, there may be information that is fed for the different users, which may be banking information, all of that. There may be central repository that is storing the information. So first, again, segregating the security aspect, where those data would be stored, how secure, how encrypted the data would be, but as part of the ecosystem around the information and analytics. Analytics actually is the very thin line when privacy breach happens. Usually, privacy breach happens in the transit or processing of data in the analytical systems. In that particular cases, for example, if you are using the information of number of banking users, not having KYC or information of users who are X particular limit and all of that. I mean, for the presentation perspective, for your end user perspective, or from the banking perspective. Now, at that point in time, at that particular scenario, these the privileged access management again comes into a very key integral role, where access management of different applications, not specific to the administrators or the processor developers who are working on it, but the application access or the microservices access that is there onto different set of APIs, different set of applications. Majority of the breaches, majority of the privacy and security breaches happens around APIs. And that's where those needs very strong governance. And yes, a very important point. I mean, has this been a complete encapsulated secure environment, no application breach would happen.
Thank you.
Great.
Can we
Just
have
to
a
add,
final
just to-
summarization from Deshpande and Sodhi? One sentence on the theme. What is your final feedback on this, whatever we discussed?
I think security.
Yeah, one of you.
Security is the key for any good solution to work successfully in the world.
Yeah, Deshpande.
Privacy, data privacy, if you want to experience, be on the receiving side. think of the parameters that you would like to keep private of yourself, and then encrypt and deliver solutions so that the solution meets all the requirements and expectations. And also the people consuming your services or being a part of your network, they will have a wow effect and they will enjoy your services.
Thank you. I think we had a very interesting debate from all of you. And I think our audience would have got a great insight onto this topic. I personally thank each one of you for having participated in this and shared your views. We hope that we will have other times when we will be able to interact with you. FDPPA continues its activities on this data protection. I would like all of you to keep track of what we are doing, and we should be able to interact again sometime later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, Lemaya, you can take over if you want. Rakshit, Rakshit, I will bring his video. Okay, I have made him the co-host,
Yeah.
so he should be able to come. Hi, Rakshit.
Sir, namaskar.
Yeah.
Namaskar, sir. Pleasure to see you.
Yeah. Yeah, Lemaya, go ahead.
Yeah.
Your voice is breaking, Lemaya.
We can't
Yeah,
hear you.
I will stop video. Yeah. Now is it audible?
Better, yeah.
Better.
Okay.